Hello everyone, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I'm very excited because I'm going to be talking about a book that I haven't read yet, and that's a first for this channel. And that book is the anthology Dangerous Visions, edited by Harlan Ellison. Many people claim that this is the book that most exemplifies the new wave of science fiction movement that occurred in the late 60s, mid to late 60s, all the way through the 70s. And I am very excited to take this on. The reason that I'm taking on this new anthology is because I am just finishing up this older anthology. You've probably seen the other videos that I've made about the stories in this. Not every one of them, but my favorites as I read through it. This is the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, edited by Robert Silverberg, and it is an incredible showcase of all the best science fiction that came before the New Wave. Basically, this is what the Science Fiction Hall of Fame voted to be the stories most representative of the Golden Age, and it just happened to come out 2 years before Harlan Ellison's Dangerous Visions. And they really go well together because this is a book that exemplifies the Golden Age era that came right before the New Wave, and this book exemplifies the New Wave. And it is interesting that this is looked at the end of an era, and this is the beginning of another era. So they're very fun, I'm hoping, to read together. When I first started this YouTube channel, I didn't really have this idea, but my brother's been going through the Philip K. Dick short story collection called Paycheck, and has been going story by story and asking that our subscribers follow along with him. And I think that's an incredible idea, and I would like to make the same offer for Dangerous Visions. So if you'd like to read along, I highly recommend you grab a copy of the book. There are paperbacks. This is a hardback edition. It is a first, but it's a book club. It's not the actual first, which goes for quite a bit of money. But I'm glad to have this book club, to have the incredible cover with the eye and the information coming into the eye. Very, very cool. You can also, if you don't like to read along with an actual book copy, if you like to listen to your books as you drive or on your headphones, this is available on Audible. As is this. The Science Fiction Hall of Fame is also available on Audible, and that's how I listened to a major chunk of these stories, was on Audible. I do not plan to do the same with Dangerous Visions. I plan to read it straight from the paperback, but if I do listen to any of it on Audible, I'll let you know how it goes. The Science Fiction Hall of Fame was really enjoyable to listen to on Audible. So with that in mind, I have read through all the introductions in this book, and there's actually a total of 3 that were in the first edition. And I want to just kind of go over what the introductions talk about, because they're very interesting. And the first introduction is by Isaac Asimov. I guess they call it a foreword 1, is by Isaac Asimov. And it's interesting because Harlan Ellison, when he came up with the idea for this book, and this is, we'll talk about this way more in depth when we get to his foreword, but when he first came up with this idea, it was his goal to only include writers that were very groundbreaking at the time, trying new things. He wanted this to be a revolutionary and a controversial science fiction book. But he did ask Asimov to participate, which was an interesting choice, because Asimov was, of course, really important during the Golden Age. But when this was published in 1967, and a few years before, Asimov had kind of left science fiction behind and was really interested in writing science fact. And if you look at the bibliography of Isaac Asimov, he wrote way more books that are science fact than science fiction. He has a massive collection of science fact books that are really very enjoyable to read. But compared to the size of his science fiction, it's strange that he's known as a science fiction writer, but he really did write very few science fiction books. He did a lot more science fact. But anyway, at this point, he was really enjoying writing science fact, and Harlan Ellison asked him to write a story for this upcoming anthology, Dangerous Visions. And Isaac Asimov, I think, made the right choice in saying that he didn't really feel like he had anything at that moment groundbreaking to write about, so he didn't feel like he would fit in with the other writers in the anthology. But he did agree to write a foreword for the anthology, and he did, and I think it was a really great choice because his foreword is really interesting to read. What it talks about is how the revolution of the Golden Age began, which is very interesting because Harlan Ellison wanted this to be a revolution away from the Golden Age. And Asimov understood that and decided to write about what the revolution away from early 30s, and I think he even goes a little bit into the 40s science fiction, what the Golden Age revolution was like. So he talks about science fiction that was driven by John W. Campbell, who was hugely influential for the Golden Age. He started working as an editor at Astounding Magazine in the late 30s and changed what people expected of science fiction. And basically what Isaac Asimov talks about in this foreword is that before Campbellian science fiction, people were just writing adventure stories that could have been westerns or could have been science fiction. And he felt that Campbell changed that Campbell expected stories to actually have compelling characters, but also compelling plots that included science, and that if you took the science out, they would fall apart. And I find that if you look at the first copies of Galaxy magazine, I have October 1951 here, and they ran this for a while. This is Galaxy magazine. For a long time on the back of Galaxy magazine, they had a really interesting advertisement for the magazine. And I just want to showcase what they wrote on the back of this because it is exactly what Asimov is talking about in his foreword to Dangerous Visions about how the Golden Age revolution happened. The top of this advertisement says, "You'll never see it in Galaxy." And then it has two sections of prose. And I'm going to read a little bit of each of them. The first one is obviously a Western bit of prose. Hoofs drumming, Bat Durston came galloping down through the narrow pass at Eagle Gulch, a tiny gold colony 400 miles north of Tombstone. He spurred hard for a low overhanging of rimrock, and at that point a tall, lean wrangler stepped out from behind a high boulder, six-shooter in a sun-tanned hand. Now, right next to that is a section of prose that is obviously science fiction, and as we read it, we'll see that it is literally the exact same prose, just with words changed to make it science fiction. Jets blasting, Bat Durston came screeching down through the atmosphere of Belzingjaj. I don't know how you're supposed to say that. A tiny planet 7 billion light years from Sol. He cut out his super hyperdrive for the landing, and at this point, a tall, lean spaceman stepped out of the tail assembly, proton gun blaster in a space-tanned hand. So they're demonstrating through this how you could just take a Western and change adjectives and nouns to make it into a science fiction story. And this is what science fiction was before this Campbellian revolution. And he does say that there are many people that are outside of this type of science fiction writer. There were greats in the pulp age, and there were greats, of course, H.G. Wells and even Jules Verne going backwards. There were people that he really respected. So he doesn't want to give the idea that that was the only type of science fiction before the Campbellian period, but he says that that is kind of the bulk of it, and it really makes sense. Asimov also talks about in this first foreword that for him the golden age was the time when he felt science fiction was at its best, and that he has a nostalgia for it and he's sad to let it go. And he knows that science fiction has to change, that a revolution has to occur, but for him, it will always be the golden age. And then he talks about the fact that Harlan asked him to write one of the stories for Dangerous Visions, and he just feels that he can't, that he is becoming himself a relic of the golden age and doesn't really have a place in this new revolution of science fiction. Really a fantastic foreword. Then he wrote another foreword, foreword number 2. Isaac Asimov, again, and it's called Harlan and I. And this is fantastic because it's just it's a little true story about Asimov meeting Harlan for the first time. And we all know Harlan's personality is massive. He was the kind of punk rocker of science fiction. And when he first met Asimov, Asimov tells the story that he looked at Asimov with adoration and was so excited, it seemed to Asimov, to meet him. And he said, you're Asimov, this is incredible. And then he said, you're nothing. And it completely deflated Isaac Asimov, who was getting so excited to meet this young fan. And Harlan steps in on a footnote and talks about the fact that he didn't say Asimov was nothing. I want to make sure I say this right. Oh, yeah, he didn't. He claims in the footnote, he says, I didn't say you are nothing. He said, I said you're not so much, because he was taken aback that this person that was a hero to Harlan Ellison for so long, he was realizing was just a man at that point. He was meeting just a man. And he said, you're not so much. But Isaac Asimov gets back at him by making him stand up to introduce him to a crowd of people the next day when Asimov's doing a speech at a convention, and makes fun of how short Harlan Ellison was. And he says they were good friends after that, all the way along. Finally, we get the introduction, which is written by Harlan Ellison, and that's where he really outlines what he wants this book to be. And it starts out with, he wants this book to be a revolution. And it's interesting because it turned out to be exactly what he did want it to be. This book is incredibly revolutionary and is the American counterpart to what many say was a revolution that was already going on in England at the time. And it's interesting because he actually tries to distance himself in this foreword from the revolution that was going on in England in science fiction that many people call the beginning of the New Wave. And that was created by Michael Moorcock in New World's science fiction magazine. This is the only one I have. They're very hard to get here in the States. I'm sure that they're all over England. I have no idea. But this is the one that I have, the Concluding the Shores of Death by Michael Moorcock. And Harlan tries to say that what he's doing is different than what Moorcock's doing over in England. But time didn't hold that to be true. If you look at the history of science fiction, many people say that Harlan's Dangerous Visions is the American counterpart of that new wave in science fiction. But there's no doubt about the fact that this is highly influential and very much worth a read. And I think that it really fits perfectly right after reading this one. Because this is the Science Fiction Hall of Fame voting for the best writers from the Golden Age and best short stories from the Golden Age. And this is Harlan Ellison picking the best stories from the new wave of science fiction that was coming out at the time. So I think they really complement each other. If you want to read along, you can read the front matter, or if you listen to it on Audible, it works just as well. The first story that we will be reading, of course, is the first one in the book. And that is Evensong by Lester Del Rey, which I'm really looking forward to. It's a bit of a short one, but I will be making a video of it in about, I'd say, a couple of days, 3-4 days. So if you'd like to read along, please grab the book and join in. All right, thank you very much. If you'd like to partake in this experiment with me, go ahead and click like on this video and subscribe so that you can see future videos. Thank you very much.